This is not an ideal sound booth. It's literally just a closet. But sometimes you gotta make do. And today I'm gonna show you how I make do with this setup, which is not ideal, and how I make it sound like a professional studio. Let's check it out. So the most common thing I see people forget is to turn off their AC. And you can actually see that I took the grill off of it, and it looks hideous, but if the grill is on there, it's actually way louder. And so I actually took it off so that if it is on and it happens to come on while I'm recording, it's not as loud. But step number one, turn off your AC. So with this sort of booth, what I try to do was get some sort of like foam treatment. You can find these on Amazon. They're pretty inexpensive for like a 12 pack. And then I just kind of line them up. This just breaks up the sound a little bit. It's not ideal. Again, you'll notice that in here I actually do have a little bit of reflections, and it's not the ideal booth, but I think this helps tremendously. I've even got some bass traps in here, and these guitar things aren't. This is just because it's literally a storage closet, so I just have to make it work. What does work a lot is this mic shield. These are a little bit pricier. This one's like I think around $200, but you can find different ones that are a little bit cheaper. I think it helps a lot. So super important to make sure you can get something like this, because this will kind of control your voice and make it not reflect as much in whatever space you're in. So if you can swing it, I highly recommend going for one of these. Pop filter, you gotta have one. This is one of my favorite pop filters. It's very sturdy. It actually is double-sided, so it has 2 layers. It's very nice, it works awesome, and it's not flimsy, which is my favorite part about it. It has a nice long sort of neck that, works for any mic. Now this is a controversial one, but for me it's worked. So what I did here is, it's a little DIY. But normally you would have a closet door, and you'll notice that I don't have it. It's one of these that's on a rail. Reason being is because to have a proper door in a booth, you technically need it to be able to be sealed through. You need a hermetic seal, and I couldn't do that here. Just didn't have the budget, and it's just not plausible for what it is. So instead of just putting a regular door, which would have caused more reflections and would have been annoying to work with, I decided to go for a curtain. This is actually a double blackout curtain, and they're pretty thick. They're meant supposedly for audio dampening. They don't work that well, but they do help with reflections, and the fact that it's double helps a lot too. So usually I just shut this out, and it sounds pretty good. It does kill a little bit of the ambient noise in the back. Obviously there's no seal on the floor, which is fine. But a combination of all of these things get this space to be as good as I can kind of get it. The rest of the stuff happens on the computer. Now I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is listen to what I recorded. I just kind of recorded a random improvised sort of thing. It's supposed to be dumb and funny, but listen carefully to the quality. You're going to hear the room tone very subtly. But if you were in a studio environment, or if you sent this to a studio client, they might hear it and be like, what's that room tone going on in the background? So let's listen to that.
This is a test recording. I don't actually have much to say, so I'm just going to talk like my generic voiceover voice.
Now, again, very subtle, but you'll notice that there is a little bit of that room tone, and the voice sounds a little thin. The reason it sounds a little thin is because it's just a really tiny room, and, just doesn't give me a lot of options. Also has to do a little bit with the mic. For this mic, I'm using an AKG 414. This mic, for example, is a little bit boomier on my voice. So in this case, the treatment that I have done to the closet has seemed to have made somewhat of a difference. There isn't a ton of reflections. There is very minimal room tone. And for the most part, it's a pretty good environment. But there have been times where I have to record during the day, and there might be a plane flying over the house or something, or you hear a truck in the background. And those are the times that you would want to use what I'm about to show you. The most important tool that I've used for this kind of thing, for like cleaning up, a more like home recorded voiceover, is a gate. And the one that I like to use the most is the Neutron 2 gate. But you can really just use any gate, even some of the gates that come in with stock. What I like about this gate is that it allows you to filter out specific frequencies. So you're not just filtering the whole thing as a whole, and you can kind of leave some of the low end and some of the high end, and only make it trigger when a specific frequency comes in. If you're completely confused and you're like, what is he talking about? What is a gate? Well, I'll explain it. A gate is basically, very simply put, something that
turns off when a certain threshold of sound passes and turns off when it goes below it. In other words, if I set the level down like here and there's just like a little AC in the background and it's just kind of like floating over here like a little hum, that gate is not going to open. You're going to hear silence. Now, the moment I start talking and there's like a peak and the volume goes past that threshold, the gate opens. So now you can hear everything that is being said. The moment I stop talking and we get back to that just room tone and like a AC or something, it cuts it off. So what's really cool about this is that in this particular example, if I turn this on, I do have a little bit of room tone, but when I play it,
is a test.
It'll be completely silent.
This is a test recording.
So right there, you'll hear that there's like little kind of blips and stuff that are coming in, and that's because I have to adjust it a little bit. But you'll see here in the high threshold, for example, it's like almost getting past the gate, and so you hear it slightly opening on those high frequencies. If I just take that up a tiny bit and a tiny bit in the middle, it's basically gone. So now when I play this and I actually get to the talking part, you'll see it actually open up past that threshold.
This is a test recording.
And then it closes. Now, take note, as my voice got quieter at the end of that phrase, it started cutting off.
Recording.
I didn't get the full G chording, So you have to be careful and like tweak it.
Recording.
There you go. And
Recording.
So you're going to want to mess with it and find the sweet spot. Most gates work very similarly. Just mess around with it. Even just a little bit of gating is going to help a ton to get rid of that sound. Now, once I've done that, I found kind of like where I like it.
I don't actually have much to say.
I feel like my voice is a little thin because of the room. So what I'll do here is I'll usually come in and add a compressor. If you don't know what a compressor does, similar to a gate, just a little bit different, but the concepts are fairly in the same ballpark. What a compressor does, it'll take quiet sounds and make them louder, and it makes loud sounds quieter, meaning you set a point that you want to be like the bass level. So if you say, I want anything that's too quiet down here to shoot up to like my threshold. And then if it's too loud, you want it to come down. And so what you get is this really nice compressed vocal. It just feels nice and full and everything's level, all that stuff. Now, it's a little bit trickier to really get a proper feel for it. There's a bunch of like presets that you can use, which might sound nice, but I highly recommend watching a video. There's a ton of resources on YouTube about understanding compression and stuff. I highly recommend it. This is my favorite compressor that I use for this just because it's quick and simple and it sounds pretty good for voiceovers. It's the R Comp from Waves, and you can actually get this one for I think like $30 when it's on sale. Otherwise, it's not that pricey. I highly recommend looking into it.
I don't actually have much to say, so I'm just going to talk like my generic voiceover voice.
So in this case, as you can see, this is a kind of like a setting that I use on my voice because I'm always using the same mic. It's always my voice. So I kind of already have everything preset. But what's really cool about this is that now you can already hear some of the lower frequencies that were getting lost are being brought up. And you generally want to put this after your gate because you want to compress stuff that's already, being gated. You could always do it backwards and experiment with how that sounds for you. Maybe that helps you gate out some of those other little frequencies. There's a lot of trial and error, but these two tools go hand in hand and they can do a lot for your voiceover already. The final and obviously super important tool to kind of make your room sound as good as it possibly can is an equalizer, EQ in other words. I love the Pro Q. It's my favorite EQ. I've been using it for quite some time now. It's a little pricey. So if you're just going to use the stock plugin, that's fine. I used stock plugins in the past for years. It was fine. There's stuff that went out on TV like that. You just got to really master it. But generally what you're going to want to be doing here, so I'm going to play a little part of this.
I don't actually have much to say, so I'm just going to talk like my generic.
What I like about Pro Q is that you're going to be able to see everything and like you can even.
I don't actually have much to say, so I'm just going to talk like
find exactly what frequencies are troublesome and what not. And generally without getting too complicated, you're generally trying to find what parts of your voice are lacking in your recording. So if you feel like your room has a little bit, the low end's a little messy, I generally recommend cutting some of the mid lows, definitely the sub frequencies. It's a voice. Unless you have like the voice of God and you're somehow making those frequencies happen, I highly recommend just cutting that. Anything, under 80 or so is just like unnecessary. Again, EQing itself is kind of an art, and I recommend practicing a lot, messing with it, and trying to find what works best for your voice with your microphone. Copying these settings that you see right now are going to do nothing. But this is just, again, a quick example of how I do it. And I've been using Pro Tools. So, what's cool about Pro Tools is that you can come over here and you can right click, and then you can save this track preset. And I can call this voice acting or whatever. And I can save it. And then when I come over here and right click this, I can recall track preset. And I made one called voice acting, and it will load up exactly those plugins. So now I don't have to ever worry about, you know, doing all of this again. Assuming that your booth isn't going to really change and everything's essentially the same, it makes it a no brainer. And so then you get a result like this.
This is a test recording. I don't actually have much to say, so I'm just going to talk like my generic voiceover voice. But maybe I can get a little bit more serious, a little bit quieter, to make you realize that there's different ranges in this microphone and that you need to be careful with the gate. Or maybe I'm going to get real loud and sound like I'm promoting something fun for the family. It's all fun and games until it's not.
So that's a silly little example, but you'll notice that based off of the recordings, the different styles that I did, the quality changed a lot, especially at the end there when I started kind of really projecting. You heard more of the room, and that could be a problem. So if I was going to be doing a full read with that sort of voice, I would probably tweak my settings a little bit. I wouldn't just use my preset. So, it's nice to have the preset all set up and you can just recall everything, but, use it as a baseline and tweak accordingly. So let's review just a couple of things. I think by far the most important thing you can do is add some sort of treatment. Get rid of all those reflections as much as you can. The mic shield is key for me. I think that does a lot of the heavy lifting, but all these little foam pads and stuff, you don't got to get something super fancy or expensive. Even something basic will work. Like I said, I'm going to link down below the ones that I used on, and they're available on Amazon. And, even something like curtains, like I said, if you need to put that in front of your door, that works too. Just minimize the number of hard, flat surfaces that are in your booth, because the more you have of that, the more reflections you're going to get, the more, reverby your voice is, the more troublesome it is going to be to work with. So you want to make sure you do as much treatment as possible. That is by far the best thing you can do. Next best thing you can do if you don't have the perfect space is what I just showed you with a gate, a compressor, and EQ. And you should definitely always do these things when you're doing an audition or a casting. It makes a huge difference. You don't know how many people are still casting out there just using their phone. And that's fine. I get it. Like, not everyone has the resources, but if you're serious about voice acting, you need to be serious about the investments that you make into voice acting. And for starting out, year one, year two, I think this is a perfect setup. Eventually, when you get into the big leagues, you can definitely get something a little bit more legit and, build out a proper booth and whatnot. But for now, I think this works really well. I obviously didn't forget the most important part, which is a microphone. Like I said, I'm using an AKG 414, which over time I've found is what works really well on my voice, and I really like it. Again, pricey, but worth the investment because it manages to make even that little booth sound pretty good with my voice. It's very usable. You can start small and build your way up, but make sure you don't like cheap out on the microphone and the room treatment, because those two things are going to go the furthest out of any other sort of investment you can make. You can buy one of those crazy $10,000 booths, and if you got a crappy microphone, it's just like, yeah, it's not going to be worth it. All right. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'm always responding to comments. Subscribe if you want more stuff like this. And if you're a new voice actor, you're probably making some mistakes that are losing you a lot of work. And I actually made a video on how to avoid those mistakes right here. You can check it out. Thanks for watching.